Today, I'm going to talk about light sensitivity and migraines. So this is something that is very, very common just with migraine flares themselves. And then unfortunately, when we get into that chronic migraine state or condition, it's very, very common for us to become just light sensitive in general. So we may not be in the middle of a migraine flare, but we're still very sensitive to light. And so I want to talk about that this week because this is something that I was very prone to myself. So I used to be very, very sensitive to light, never able to leave the house without my sunglasses, always, putting a hat on. And not only light, but also like particularly sunlight, but artificial light too. That could have been an issue for me, but particularly sunlight, I would say I was more sensitive to. So leaving the house without my sunglasses, forget about it, right? You think I'm going to drive in the car without my sunglasses, visor down, that sun visor down all the time, right? That was definitely my life. If I didn't have my sunglasses with me, I'd probably just turn around and go back in the house and get them. And then being outside, this was something that would generate some anxiety for me. So if I were meeting a friend for coffee at Starbucks, and if it was a nice day, my mind would immediately start going to, oh gosh, is she going to want to sit outside? Well, gosh, does that Starbucks, do they have umbrellas? Like, I can't sit in the sun. I'm going to need to be in the shade. Do I need to bring a hat? What if she gets there first and then she takes the shady side of the table? I better get there like early so I can grab my spot. Like, it would be this whole like anxiety rundown just to meet somebody for coffee, worrying that I might be exposed to sunlight and exposed to that light. I have definitely experienced where the sunlight like reflecting like off the hood of a car, or like a flash, like the sunlight reflecting like off of a mirror into my eyes. I've gotten auras and then subsequent full-blown migraines after that. So I totally relate to people that have that light sensitivity. A lot of my clients, they may not be as sensitive to sunlight as I was. A lot of my clients are more sensitive to artificial light. So the fluorescent lighting, if they're going in like Sam's Club, Costco, Walmart, that overhead fluorescent lighting, that's a nightmare, right? So that artificial lighting, if they work in an environment with overhead artificial lighting, that's a nightmare. I work with a lot of teachers, and so that classroom environment, you've got the overhead lighting, then you've got the lighting for the presentation, the classroom presentation, projecting on the whiteboard. That's a real nightmare. Some people are very sensitive to the light coming from a computer screen or from a device. And so just going into work and you work on a computer and that computer light hitting the retina all the time is just excruciating. So with light sensitivity, very commonly there's like particular type of light that people are more sensitive to than other types of light. But the overall umbrella here, right, is a light sensitivity in some form. So like I say, it's kind of a classic migraine symptom that when you're in that full-blown migraine, right, you want to be in the dark room, you want the drapes pulled, all the lights off, right? A lot of people, they're not going to get on their phone, or they're not going to even watch TV if they have a migraine. They're just going to listen to something perhaps because they're so light sensitive. A lot of people even have to put like an eye mask on, that type of thing, just to make sure that they're completely blocking any light from hitting their retina. That's a kind of a classic, well-documented migraine symptom. And while that's horrible enough, once you come out of the migraine, that remits and you kind of go back to your, quote unquote, normal life. Once you get into that chronic migraine state, like I used to be in, like my clients are in, this is where the light sensitivity amps up and is there to some degree, even if we're not in a full-blown migraine, right? So now this light sensitivity symptom, this is impacting our life even if we're not in the full-blown throes of a migraine. And this can get very, very frustrating. A lot of people, they have to wear sunglasses even inside of their home, right? I have many clients who have daily headaches and migraines, and very commonly when you get to that level of frequency and severity, now you're in your own home with your sunglasses on. You're in your own home with all the curtains drawn, with the lights dimmed. I've had clients where they have not opened the curtains or the blinds in their home for years. They don't remember the last time they opened up the blinds and the curtains in their home, because just that light coming into the room is too much for them to bear. And, this is not pleasant. Most people, their mood is affected if they're not receiving adequate sunlight. And so if we have to live even in our own home with the curtains drawn, without getting that natural light coming in, hitting our retina, many people are going to struggle with a low mood. So, again, by the time we have those chronic migraines, especially if we're in daily head pain, it would be kind of unusual if your mood was chipper and bright, right? Already you're going to be struggling with a low mood and, feeling doomed and struggling with despair. And then you can't even get that sunlight hitting your retina. So it's well documented that exposure to the sun, we humans are not nocturnal animals. We are supposed to be awake when the sun is up, and that sunlight hitting our retina regulates our circadian rhythm and helps regulate a whole variety of hormones that I won't even go into now. So when we have this light sensitivity symptom throughout our, day, and then we can't receive that input of the sunlight, it really impacts the whole system here. So it's, this light sensitivity symptom, it's really no joke. So I want to discuss what is that light sensitivity symptom actually telling us, and how does it relate to the overall underlying causes of the migraines themselves. So if you've been following the podcast, I talk about the 3 things that we have to do to restore our health and also maintain our health so that our body doesn't generate migraines. And I call these things the 3 principles. So when we are in a state of health, our body doesn't generate symptoms. We just feel good. We're living our life to our full potential, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But when we fall out of a state of health, it's because there's some deficiencies or some blockers or some missing pieces within what I call the 3 principles. So if we want to restore our health and maintain our health, we have to understand first, what are those blockers or deficiencies or missing pieces within these 3 principles? And then what do we need to do to remove blockers, fill up deficiencies, kind of restore ourselves within these 3 principles? When we give our body what it needs within all 3 of these principles, our body is designed to restore itself back to health, back to homeostasis, back into balance, and then we don't have symptoms. So what are the 3 principles? The 3 principles are, number 1, we have to get the nutrients that our cells need. Our cells run on nutrients. They don't run on Starbucks, Frappuccinos, and unicorn dust. Everything that our cells are going to do require nutrients. So we have to be able to get the nutrients to the cells. That's principle number 1. Principle number 2 is we have to remove metabolic waste material and other toxins from the cells and ultimately from our body. So when our cells get those nutrients that they need to do their work, they do their work, but then they make waste material. They make byproducts, metabolic waste materials, toxins. Our cells are making those all the time. It's not just about the things in the environment, our cleaning supplies or the pesticides or the air pollution. Those things don't help, but our body is making toxins all the time as well. That's normal. That's why we have the ability to get these things out of our body. But if there's a backup, if there's a backlog, then we're going to have a problem. And then the third principle is we have to restore our resiliency and vitality so that we can withstand the stressors that are continuously bombarding us and kind of knocking us out of a state of health. So that's the three principles. So how does this relate to light sensitivity? So when that photon of light comes in and hits our retina, that is a tiny physical stressor on our body. So when we are in a state of health, it's like we have a needle pointing north. And when the needle is north, it's in the green zone and we feel good. Our body is not generating symptoms. Now, we're never going to stay in the green zone because we are continuously being by stressors. And those stressors are going to push our needle down towards west. So when we think of stressors, we don't think of like little tiny photons of light hitting our retina. We think of like really big things, right? Like I ran 5 miles. That's going to be a stressor. So we have big stressors and we have little tiny stressors, but we are continuously being bombarded by stressors, big and small, and those are pushing our needle down. Hi there, it's Dr. Leslie. If you're a woman having 8 or more migraine days a month, let's talk. I'll show you how to drop them to near zero in 90 days without adding more medication. In fact, you can even lower or maybe even completely wean off of your medication within 90 days and without agonizing cold turkey withdrawals. Let me tell you about my client Judy. She was on such strong medications for her migraines that she was nearly bedridden and could barely function. She had to close the doors of her small business and felt like a failure. She wondered every day, why am I doomed to suffer from these migraines? But just like you, she started listening to my Healing Migraines Naturally podcast and a spark ignited. She knew that if she could just figure out why these migraines started in the first place, she could restore and recover her health again. So she booked her free consult call with me, and the rest is history. She now goes months between migraines and runs her small business full-time again because she's completely off of those preventative medications. She followed the 12-week plan and got incredible results. I've worked with women just like Judy from all over the United States overcome migraines naturally. So if you're serious about healing your migraines, then tap the link in the description and book a free consult call with me, just like Judy did. We do cap new clients monthly, so if the calendar's full, the doors are closed for now, so don't wait to reclaim the life you deserve to live. No matter how hopeless things seem now, with expert guidance, you can heal and recover from migraines. So I look forward to chatting with you. Click the link now to schedule your call. We have physical stressors. We have mental and emotional stressors, kind of the things that we call stress, right? Like, oh, that was really stressful. That's a mental and emotional stressor. And then we have all of these physical stressors that are pushing the needle down, like little photons of light. It's our own resiliency and vitality that keeps the needle up in the face of all of these stressors. And this is what I mean within this third principle. So we have to have enough resiliency and vitality to weather this constant pushing down of our needle. We have to counter that with our own resiliency and vitality. So when these photons of light are hitting our retina, as I'm taping this, I'm sitting in front of 2 really big lights. And there would have been a time where I would have thought I would never make it through a 45-minute podcast with all of these lights hitting me. But I can do that now. I have to have enough resiliency and vitality to weather the stressor of these intense LED video lights hitting my retina, bombarding my retina as I'm taping this. So my needle is continuously getting pushed down here, and I've got to keep it up in the face of that. So I have, and if you're listening to this podcast and you're prone to migraines, you too, we have a little zone on this dial that's called migraine zone. And so if our needle goes into that zone, we are going to get a migraine. And everyone on this dial has little symptom zones, right? It could be because people are prone to different symptoms, different symptom patterns, or different symptom like clusters. We call those diseases or diagnoses, right? So everyone along this dial, they have sort of their little symptoms that they're prone to. It might be irritability, it might be hypertension or high blood pressure, it might be migraines, might be autoimmune disease. Totally south is death. We want to avoid that, right? So, but as the needle falls, then our body is going to generate the symptoms that correspond to what's on our dial. So we have a little dial, a little zone on our dial called migraine zone. And if our needle gets pushed into that zone, we're going to start to develop the very first symptoms of a migraine. I call that the uh-oh moment, right? The needle goes right to the top of the zone and we go, uh-oh, I feel something, right? Uh-oh, I feel that way in my head when I might start getting a migraine, or uh-oh, I feel that weird feeling in my stomach when I start to get a migraine, right? That's the uh-oh moment. So we are exposed to that light. We're being bombarded by photons of light. The stress of that is pushing our needle down. And if we don't have the resiliency and vitality to push the needle back up, we're going to tip right into the top of our migraine zone. And that's when we're going to go, uh-oh, it's really bright. Uh-oh, things are looking a little weird, right? At the beginning, for a lot of people, when they first get into that migraine zone, the light starts looking a little strange, right? It's like things seem just a little different. Things might seem a little bit brighter, or they seem a little less clear, a little fuzzy. There's just like a little shift in how we perceive the light. If we're prone to auras, then we start to notice the very, very first little inkling that we're getting an aura, right? And a lot of auras will be set off by this inability to weather the stress of these photons of light. I've definitely experienced that, where I've gotten kind of blasted by a lot of light photons, by like a reflection off of a car hood or something like that, and that's been enough to tip me into an aura and then a full-blown migraine. So from a third principle standpoint, we have to have enough resiliency and vitality to weather the stress of those photons hitting our retina. So it's not just the same every day, it ebbs and flows. And we can feel this, right? Because there's some days where we can be outside for a couple hours and we never have that uh-oh moment. We never have that full-blown migraine. And then there's other days where we're like in the car for 5 minutes and we're going, uh-oh, this is too much, right? Because our resiliency and vitality varies on a day-to-day basis. So some days we can weather these triggers, right, better than other days. So we can restore our resiliency and vitality. There are natural therapies that will add vitality to us. There are vitality enhancing habits or vitality draining habits. So those are things that we might need to look at. Like, for example, if we stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning playing video games, that's not going to be a vitality enhancing habit, right? So sometimes we need to tidy up some habits to increase our vitality. But what is the problem for most of us is that we actually have some holes in our vitality bucket. So I like to think of our vitality as sort of like we've got this vitality bucket, and we want to fill up our vitality bucket so that we have enough vitality to weather all of these stressors. But we have like a hole in the bottom of our vitality bucket, and so we're draining our vitality. So we're constantly like, I'm going to go to bed on time, and I'm going to eat right, and I'm going to work on, relaxing more. We're going to work on all of these habits, but it's like we can never get that bucket filled up. Well, that's because we've got a hole in the bottom of the bucket. We need to patch that up. And these holes are coming from the mental and emotional side of us. So I've done other podcasts on how the mental and emotional component to migraines is draining our vitality or creating a hole in the bottom of our vitality bucket. So if we're going to improve our resiliency and vitality, there's usually two pieces. One is doing sort of a little tidy up if we have any habits or something that are draining our vitality that we didn't realize. Like I say, there are some natural therapies that will add vitality to us, but all of this will be for naught if we don't identify if there's a hole in our vitality bucket and do what we need to do to patch that hole up. And when we do that, then that's going to go a long way to increasing our ability to withstand all of these photons hitting our retina, all of this exposure to all of this light, and then you too can be able to sit in front of, high intensity lights for a long time. What would it be like to be in your home and be able to open up the curtains and the blinds and be able to get that nice sunlight into your home again, not having to wear sunglasses in your home, feeling comfortable going back to work, and not having to hang out in a conference room with the lights off during part of the day because you can't take the overhead lighting anymore, being able to go in a store and shop leisurely without having to worry about the overhead lighting making you feel worse, right? A big component of that is just our resiliency and vitality in the face of those stressors. There's a second component to light sensitivity, and that is within the second principle. So when we have an overload of metabolic waste material and other toxins in the body, then we become hypersensitive to tiny things. So this is another notorious issue for people with chronic migraines, right? We are hypersensitive to the tiniest little things, right? So it's not just the little photons of light that we're sensitive to, but we're sensitive to the weather, right? There's a barometric pressure change that no one else can even perceive is happening, and we're getting struck down with a migraine. I've had clients where the wind blows too hard and they're in bed with a migraine, and everybody else is like, it's windy, or, I barely noticed, right? We're so sensitive to the tiniest noises, the tiniest odors. Then we get hypersensitive to any changes in our routine, right? We wake up too early, migraine. We go to bed too late, migraine. We normally eat lunch at noon and it gets pushed till 2, migraine, right? Any tiny little thing we become hypersensitive to. And that's on the physical side. Those things that I described are like physical stressors. But then on the mental and emotional side, we also become hypersensitive. So this is where the irritability comes in, right? Oh gosh, will you stop tapping on the table? You're just annoying me so much, right? Like it get to the point where people, like the tiniest little noise, like they hear somebody chewing, right? And they're just like, oh my goodness, that chewing noise, right? And other people are like, I don't hear any chewing, right? But we're like, oh my goodness, right? Stop chewing. Like these tiny little noises, we become really irritable, right? We become really keyed up, right? So we startle easily, right? Somebody walks in the room and we didn't realize, and then we see them and we're like jumping out of our skin, right? So this hypersensitivity, any little conflict with somebody, right? Oh my goodness, I said that at work. I said that in the meeting. And then we're up in the 3 o'clock in the morning, we're up replaying the meeting. Oh my goodness, should I have said that? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I should have said it like this, right? It's like we're just like hypersensitive. Did I say the wrong thing? Did I offend someone, right? It's this mental and emotional, keyed up, irritable, hypersensitive state that we get into. So all of these hypersensitivity reactions are actually symptoms that you have an overload of metabolic waste material and toxins that's built up in the body. And what is the connection to this in toxins? So toxins, which is kind of a big buzzword within the natural medicine industry that I'm a part of as a naturopathic doctor, I usually call them metabolic waste materials because our body is making them. And this is a big point that I'm trying to get across, because people are so paranoid around environmental toxins, which I'm not downplaying. It's not great to be exposed to all of these environmental toxins, but there's very little we can do about it. We can make conscientious choices around cleaning products or things we're bringing into our home, whether, eating organic is within budget this week. Though there are some choices that we can make to eliminate environmental toxins, but so much of what we're exposed to is just steeped in the environment, and there's not a tremendous amount that we have control over. And also, it's not like we've always been living in a pristine environment. We like to think that, 500 years ago, people were living in sort of this like crystal clear air, crystal clear water type of environment, and that in, pre-industrial times, people were not exposed to environmental toxins. And this is not accurate. So when people, we've been lighting fires since the dawn of time. So when you burn things, you are putting a tremendous amount of toxins into the air. And so here in America, we're living in homes where the interior air quality is actually like incredibly pristine compared to the air quality in people's dwellings in the past, in pre-industrial times. People would be, burning wood, animal dung in their dwelling without very much ventilation, adequate ventilation. This was not a pristine environment that people were living in from an air quality perspective. If you're talking about water quality, again, there are some toxins in our water now because of the purification process that it's not full of naturally occurring metals and things like that may be in the water supply that people were drinking. So like I say, I'm not going to get into a whole ton of specifics on this, but basically what I'm trying to say is we have this kind of mythology around, the pristine environment that humans were living in before human industry, and that's not really accurate. We were living in dwellings that were, overgrown with mold and poor ventilation and the whole bit. So we've been exposed to environmental toxins since the dawn of time. And also our body makes toxins. So even if we were living in some sort of pristine environment with, mountain air and a spring water and a fantastic dwelling without any mold and great ventilation, our body is making waste material all the time. That's normal. We have processes within the body to remove those toxins from the cell, and we have our organs of detoxification and elimination to get them out of our body. So if we were, living in an environment without any toxins in the past, or if our body wasn't making toxins, we wouldn't have the ability to get rid of these toxins from our body, right? So we have what we need to get the waste material and the environmental toxins out of our body. Our liver and our lungs and our kidneys are the three organs of detoxification. And then we eliminate processed toxins via the skin, via the stool, via the urine, via the breath. And for us women, when we menstruate, we are actually eliminating toxins with our period every month. And so we have the ability to detoxify these toxin molecules and then eliminate them from the body. So if we have that ability, why are they building up? So if our organs of detoxification and elimination don't have the nutrients that they need to run the detoxification pathways, to get the toxins and waste material out of the cells, we're going to not be able to keep up with the load. Again, like our liver is doing the bulk of the detoxification work. Our liver needs nutrients to do that work. And so if we have a deficiency within that first principle of getting the nutrients to the cells, our liver is going to slow down, and then we're going to start to develop a backlog. From the other side, we have our third principle, our resiliency and vitality. This is not only sort of this phenomenon with what I like to call our needle or a compass needle, but it's also the literal cellular voltage or cellular energy. So again, if we don't have enough cellular energy or enough cellular voltage within, say, the liver is not going to run those detoxification pathways as fast. And so they're going to slow down, and the liver is going to struggle to keep up with the load. So the first principle and the third principle directly impact the second principle. And this is what is missing. This understanding is really missing within the natural medicine industry that I'm a part of, because most people within the natural medicine industry, they're always talking about detox, 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 cleanse, cleanse. And they are trying to push the liver to run faster, but they're not addressing the first principle or the third principle. I see this all the time when I take on new clients and we do a detailed assessment. Most of the people that work with me, they've already gone to a naturopathic doctor or a chiropractor or a functional medicine doctor. I'm not the first natural practitioner they've worked with. So I'm reviewing what they've been told to do by their natural practitioner. And most of the time, it's like detox, detox, detox. But they're not assessing, are we getting the nutrients that the liver needs, and does the liver have enough cellular energy to actually run these detox pathways? So they're pushing all of this stuff to try to make the liver run faster, and it's like you're beating a dead horse, right? The horse isn't going to run any faster if it's crippled. So first we have to get the first principle and the third principle running better, in a better condition, in a better state, and then that's going to feed into the second principle, and we're going to start to actually get this overload of waste material and toxins out of the body. So this has to do with light sensitivity and these other little hypersensitive reactions that we have that we're prone to with migraines, because the toxin molecules irritate the body. So you've probably heard of things like free radicals. Free radical molecules, again, a lot of people who are interested in natural healing, they might read a blog post or hear a podcast about free radicals and how they're sort of damaging the body, and you want to get those out of the body. Well, toxin molecules, waste material molecules, are free radical molecules. They're bumping into your cells and they're causing little damage. They're causing tiny, tiny injury, tiny damage to the cells of our body. So these waste material molecules, they're irritants to the body. And so as they build up and build up, we become more and more irritable physically, mentally, and emotionally, right? So we can kind of feel that physical irritability with the light sensitivity, with the sensitivity to the wind, the noise, the odors, right? All of these little hypersensitivity reactions are actually symptoms that your body is overloaded with waste material and toxins. Those mental and emotional symptoms, like the irritability and the worrying, or we call it dwelling, right? When you're up at 3 a.m. replaying what you said in the meeting, you're dwelling on the meeting. That's a mental and emotional symptom. Those are two of the most prominent mental and emotional toxicity symptoms: irritability and dwelling. And if you round up a bunch of chronic migraine sufferers and ask them if they're irritable and they dwell on stuff in the middle of the night, most of them are going to say yes. And those are actually toxicity symptoms. So I hope that this gives you a little bit of insight into this light sensitivity phenomenon and how that is, plays in to some of these other like hypersensitivity symptoms, a lot of which we call migraine triggers. They're not really migraine triggers, they're symptoms of the state of where you are at within these three principles. So if I have a client that is sensitive to light, like I used to be, I know right out of the bat that they're struggling within their third principle. Their resiliency and vitality is a little bit low because they can't keep their needle up when those photons are hitting their retina. And I also know that they have an overload of waste material and toxins because they have this symptom that is actually a toxicity symptom. So if you would like to have a better understanding of where you actually stand within these three principles, then reach out to me and book a free consult call, and let's get you started on this process. This is, I think, one of the most interesting parts of the process. Every new client I have, we do a full assessment on these three principles and where they stand within each of these three principles. And over again, my clients tell me that this has been a fascinating aspect for them to actually understand in detail what these symptoms mean and how they're all connected. Because ultimately, it's the interplay between all three of these principles that's driving not only the migraines that your body's generating, but all of the other symptoms that your body is generating. And I can tell you personally, since I was sensitive to light as well, that this is something that you don't have to live with. So I actually never wear sunglasses anymore. So I don't own a pair of sunglasses. I drive I drive without I don't own sunglasses. So anything that I'm doing is without sunglasses. It's just with these glasses. So I'm driving without sunglasses. I do play tennis. This is something that I started in the past few years. And I do wear a hat when I'm playing tennis, just so that I don't have, when I'm looking up to get the ball, I'm not getting the sun directly in my eye, and I have some visor. But I play tennis outside in the summer without any sunglasses on, just with like a ball cap on, so that I have that visor. So this is something that you can absolutely recover from. And like I say, this is a symptom that with my clients, I'm actually looking to see some improvement in. And over again, it's so wonderful when I hear from a client, this week, I actually was able to go into work, and I was able to work 8 hours at my desk with the overhead lighting without having to go in the conference room with the lights out for a few hours just to have a break from the light. Or the first time my clients say, you know what, I was actually able to take my sunglasses off in my house this week. I was actually able to open up the curtains in my house and let some natural light in for the first time in 10 years into my home. I was able to actually go into Target and leisurely shop and check out the holidays, display, or, casually just kind of browse the store without this constant thing of what's on my list? How much time have I been in here? I know I can only last 10 or 15 minutes in the Target with these lights. And they can actually enjoy shopping again. It's just wonderful to have those experiences and to reclaim your life back, because it's something that we really take for granted, right? How many people take for granted just being able to go into a Walmart, a Sam's Club, a Costco, and just leisurely shop and actually enjoy the experience without having to, just worry about all those lights. With my clients that are teachers, the first time that they can actually teach in their classroom with the lights on. So many teachers with migraines, they're the classroom where the lights are off, right? And, it's nice that, we can accommodate people that are suffering, but, it's even nicer to not be the odd one out and be the one where you don't have the lights on in the classroom. Right. So when I'm working with teachers, right, today I was actually able to turn the lights on in my classroom. These are tremendous wins for people. So this is something that you can definitely recover from. It's part of the bigger picture as to why you're getting migraines in the first place. So it's not something that's sort of why is this happening? Or, what's this weird thing that only affects me? It actually makes perfect sense when we experience this type of symptom, because it's a recurring pattern or signal within these three principles. So let me know in the comments if light sensitivity is something that you struggle with. And again, if this resonates and it's something that you're like, it's time, let's do this. I don't want to suffer with this anymore. I don't want to suffer with migraines, and I want to be able to leave my house without sunglasses. Click the link in the description to book your free consult call with me, and let's talk about what's going on. So have a great day. Talk to you guys soon.